All right, welcome back to the Business Roundtable Podcast. I'm your host, David Carr, steward of your business. And this week, I have another brand new guest, Jesse Gilmore, founder of Niche and Control with me. I've known Jesse for years. And one of the things I really love about Jesse is his story, and you're going to hear about it, about breaking free from the grind and really building scalable systems. If anything I've known, I need scalable systems and processes. And so Jesse has been helping marketing agency owners, among other business owners, from operators to CEOs, and he's got some great tools and resources we're going to share on the podcast. So welcome to the Business Roundtable, Jesse.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, David. I'm excited to talk to you and your audience.
Thank you. Absolutely. No, I think you're for those of you that have not connected with Jesse or find him on LinkedIn, he's amazing at posting just real world examples from his own life about his journey and where he's at and what he's learned. And he's been so gracious to me, sharing some of those resources as well. And so, Jesse, if you wouldn't mind, just step us back, walk us through your journey and what got you to found Niche and Control. And, just give us your little bit of a story and your background.
Sure, absolutely. I could talk probably all 30 minutes, but I'll try to keep it relatively short and compact. So Niche and Control is my fourth business, and my first three businesses were based around my skills. If I didn't work didn't get done, didn't really understand a lot about systems. I felt like a failure in my first three businesses because they actually dissolved while the business was growing because I was working 60 or 80-hour weeks for years. I got to experience what people call burnout. And it's not just a trendy word; it actually sucks. And it wasn't until I went into corporate America where I learned the power of systems and the way of taking knowledge that might be learned through experience or 20 plus years of doing a certain thing and being able to make it more systematic and be able to train other people on it. That I started realizing in corporate America was the thing that I was missing was systems. So in 2019, I started Niche and Control because the systems that we were building in corporate led towards a business acquisition of $180 million. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I just I learned how businesses get acquired, right?
Yeah.
And Niche and Control originally was kind of like my fallback option, right? Because if the acquisition happens and I get let go, got to figure out something. And I didn't really understand what my niche really was, which is kind of funny, Niche and Control. But and I started working with business owners, and very quickly I figured out that a lot of business owners do not understand systems. And they do not understand how to make a business not feel like a job and feel more like an actual business. And so I started to work with different types of clients, and through the grace of God, I connected with a marketing agency owner and took him from 15,000 to 100,000 in 9 months. And I was like, whoa, okay. So I figured out something.
Yes.
And what I started to do is package kind of what we had done over those 9 months and put it into something that I call leverage for growth, which we'll probably talk a lot more about. And over the last 5.5 years, I've specialized in marketing agencies and helping them really transition from being that operator, the same person that I was in my first three businesses, to being more of a CEO where you own a business, you lead people, and the business is not dependent upon you.
No, I mean, it's so important. I mean, whether you're a marketing agency or not, but I've seen this particularly because I see a lot of solopreneurs or very entry level folks trying to get going, like you said, Jesse, and really they basically just created themselves a job. And that's, maybe they're not working for somebody else, but you're basically, it's a job. It's not really a business. And I think that's what you're talking about. When you create systems and processes, you're actually creating a business. And it's the one that actually is desirable from the outside of, like you said, to be acquired. But if you don't have those, it's not really that desirable, because if you're gone, what's remaining? Right?
Yeah, you can find out really quickly if you have systems set up to where if you stop working, does work continue? Pretty simple. And then if you have to work, are you following a system that gives you a repeatable result or outcome? And if you're not, and everything's in your head, and the first step is really just to brainstorm and get everything out of your head. But yeah, the idea of understanding if you have a systems issue is just like, if you stop working, does any work get done?
Right. Absolutely. You cannot, and certainly, you can't, if you need to start thinking about those, developing those, if you want other people to come in, whether it's a virtual assistant, employee, subcontractor, where do they fit within your system? And if it's not clear, yeah, it's very hard
Yeah.
to grow. So that's a great lead in really to the leverage for growth, because you've actually created a whole system and a method, a framework, if you will, for success. And so maybe, would you just go over a bit? And I know there's a lot to it, but I think what I love about this framework is it's fairly straightforward. I mean, there's a lot to
Mhm.
it. Sometimes, it's just naming these things and describing them. So Jesse, I'll let you take it over. Just walk us through your leverage for growth method.
Yeah, totally. So it's evolved over the years. We're actually on version 6 of doing it. Pretty much every year we figure out
Yeah.
what's working in the market. But the core concept is pretty simple. The majority of people, let's just say the person that's listening to this is starting from scratch. You're working the 60-hour weeks. You kind of resonate with my original story, and you're like, what the heck do I do? The first step is really just to understand how you're using your time, because the relationship of you and your time gives an indication of your relationship to the business, right? And when you wake up and you immediately check emails, that's an issue, right? So when you start to look at the analysis of time, you can do what I call it's a 4-parter. It's what can you eliminate that you're doing right now? What can you automate that you like data transfers and just simple stuff, right? And then if you can't eliminate it and automate it, can you delegate it to somebody that maybe is like a fourth of what you pay yourself, right? And then from there, anything that's left over, what can you time block? Now, time blocking just is a very intentional use of certain time in order for you to minimize what's called task switching. So if you ever get at the end of a day and you're like, oh, I'm just so exhausted, right? It's decision fatigue because you're just going back and forth between different things. An example of task switching might be that you're working on a website, right? And then you immediately go into a sales call. And then right afterwards, then you're in a leadership meeting, right? That's a horrible, don't do that, right? So the main goal with the first step, which is based around time, is to start freeing up time and carving out time to work on the business. And if you can use the Pareto principle of 80-20, so if you're working 40 hours and you carve out 8 hours per day, or 8 hours per day, 8 hours per week to work on the business, then that's like the first kind of milestone. But let's just say, David, you're the guy that's trying to free up time right now. Let's say you can't get to the 8 hours. You can only find 2, right? The next question is, what do you do with those 2? So you go into step number 2, where you just get everything out of your head. You gotta understand what you're doing right now and be able to capture it, document it, right? In the way beginning, it's like ugly. It's just like this big brain dump of like, I'm doing all these things, right? But no matter what, you got to get it all out. And from there, you start to document the things that you're doing, the processes, how work gets done. And naturally, even before you start hiring, you can start following your own system. So what used to be 2 hours worth of work, when you follow your own system that you just built, that 2 hours now becomes an hour and a half or an hour, right? And then that time that you just freed up gets moved over to working on the business work, right? So then you now have 3 hours the next week. Just keep on doing that over and over and over and over and over again until you get to a certain point where everything, at least the main parts of what you're doing, is documented. And naturally, you'll hit that 8 hours, and then you'll also build systems. Now, there are more pieces, but is there anything, David, you want to?
Yeah, no, I want to. It reminds me of a book I read years ago called "Getting Things Done" by Dave Allen. But this idea of breaking things down, I think, is really important. I don't think a lot of people honestly account for their time, like you said. Reclaim your time to look at it. And I like to say, well, what is on your calendar or not on your calendar that you're doing? Like, I think sometimes people just don't account for it, and they don't realize how much time it actually takes, and counting the cost. So I really think what you're saying is look at all this, get clear, and at first it is kind of muddy and messy, and you're doing all these things. And I think this is, I would say, it's not a one and done, right? This is something you continually look at and you're evaluating, right, Jesse?
Absolutely. Yeah. The use of time, it should switch. Because if you think about if anybody is a fan of psychology, the more aware and more intentional that you become about something, the more things are going to start changing. There's like a framework called OCTAR. It's awareness, knowledge, desire, action results, right? And the first step towards any change is based around awareness. So the natural process of actually doing a time log. And one thing I should preface is the fact that it should be for both personal and professional. So it should include things like your sleep, your morning routines, your nighttime routines, when you're beginning and ending work, or is there a beginning and end, right? And what'll naturally happen is that as you become more aware of it, it'll start naturally going, oh, I probably should move this over here, or I should do X, Y, and Z. So the use of time the first time you do it is going to shift. The time that you build systems is going to shift again. So this process is cyclical. You have to go through it quite a few times.
Yeah. No, well, I like that too. I mean, I've talked about this on my other podcast, Intelligent Leadership Podcast. You and I use a system called the Core 4 or Foundational Understanding. What is your, and I even have my full focus planner here, another tool, like what is your startup routines? What's your end of the day routines? I think those are things that evolve and you have to tweak it and figure out what works best for you. Because sometimes I think, Jesse, speak to this too, because sometimes we look at other people, we think, well, they do it this way or that way. It's like, well, it may work for them, but it may not work for you. So don't just apply somebody else's system. You have to test it, see what works for you and what's going on in your life. Like you said, personally and professionally. It's not just one of the other domains.
And one thing about that is, though, there are scientific things that are telling you how to handle a morning and how to handle a nighttime. Things like the blue lights, and then in the way beginning with Core 4, I think one of the essence and the innate kind of like principles behind it is that you're giving to yourself before you're giving to others. And you kind of fill up your cup in order for you to fill up others. And I think those very simple things, like where you wake up and immediately if you go into the news or social media or checking emails, you're immediately just giving all of the energy you just built from sleep, giving it to something else. So we could probably talk for another
we could go on
5 minutes just on time and morning routines.
So let's keep going through the growth method. So you talked about, reclaiming time, kind of simplifying some things, breaking it down. Go on, keep taking us through the rest of this framework.
Yeah. So step number 1, free up your time. If you can hit the goal of 8 to 10 hours per week to work on the business, and that's not additional time, it's time that you freed up. Then you start moving that into step number 2, which is based around building those scalable systems, getting everything out of your head and your team's head into systems and procedures. Now, depending on the size of the team, I'll just do one little tidbit with this as well. Depending on the size of the team, if you're working with a larger team, you can do a thing called value stream mapping, where you actually get the team to crowdsource all the information. That works really well with teams. If you're more of like a solopreneur, it's really just a brain dump and then you're reorganizing it. One key tip, and it's probably found in my book.
There you go. Which we'll put a link to that, by way. So.
Yeah, anybody that wants a free copy of the book, I'll give.
Awesome. Look at that. See, you're listening. You're getting value, all sorts of value here on the Business Roundtable. Thank you, Jesse.
There's a very specific strategy of building systems in there, and it's this inside-out approach. Everybody else is telling you to build sales systems and marketing systems, and then fulfillment is 3rd or 4th on the list. It actually is the opposite. It needs to be based around fulfillment first, then marketing, then sales. And the reason being is that when you are confident in delivery, it shows up in the confidence in sales calls. When you're confident in fulfillment, you can rest assured that people are empowered, which is one of the steps we'll get into. But anyway, step number 1, freeing up the time. Step number 2, build the systems. When you build the systems, it sets up for step number 3, which is really based around the offer. Because if you build systems, and right now your offer is based around effort. So I'm going to charge $150 per hour for 10 hours of work, right? What happens with the systems is that you used to charge for 10 hours, but now you can do the same work for 4 hours, right? And immediately you go, okay, I need to switch the model. So step number 3 is where you look at a value-based offer. Now, I'm not talking about a Hormozy offer that's irresistible and like a million different freaking things ever, which confuses everybody and it sounds crappy. It's actually just a very effective simple, clear, value-based offer. And it's got to be priced according to value for your ideal clients. Now, when you build systems, you'll start figuring out what is valuable, what's not valuable. And one of the greatest things we have clients do is what's called a why did you purchase interview, another thing inside of the book, where you actually ask the questions to the clients. What was life like before working together? What was the decision-making process? What made you decide to work together? What results have you gotten? And they'll tell you what is most valuable. When you price according to that, you're automatically starting to figure out product market fit. Now, I can go into the other 2 steps, but is there anything that you want to touch on, David?
No, that's it's an interesting, you're flipping it on its head, but I think of like, could you I think produce or whatever you think the end product is, do you have confidence in your ability? That's what I hear you saying, to produce and put that out there. Now, maybe I think sometimes, if it's, you have to find out, is there a market for what you're building? I think that's what sometimes people do too. Maybe that's what they're saying is in the marketing and selling, but you have to figure out, do I have a solution that people really want? Or am I building the solution in a silo? And then I think that's maybe what happens, Jesse, is like, you got to get, when they say doing the marketing or sales, they're trying to see, is there interest? So you have to kind of know that, and then yes, build on the production. But I agree with you. If there's not confidence that you feel that you can fulfill, then yeah, you're gonna have a difficulty selling it, because you're like, I don't know if I'm actually gonna be able to, satisfy, meet my, and hopefully exceed my clients' expectations.
Yeah, I want to preface it real quick. The strategies that I'm teaching and I'm talking about are for people that have gone through what's called a proof of concept. So proof of concept is where you have 5 paying clients for a service, a very specific service, and you've delivered results where you're getting case studies and testimonials. That's part of the reason why any of the agency owners that read my book and they get excited, they're like, sweet, Jesse is a coach. She sounds cool. I am. But if they're before the 5 paying clients, I'm like, it's not going to work. You have to go through that process. And the reason being is that when you build systems, you don't want to build them prematurely. And you don't want to actually even niche down until you've gone through a process of kind of figuring it out. Very similar to what I was saying with Niche and Control's founding. I worked with a B2C SaaS company. I worked with a copywriting company. I worked with a couple of different companies until I found in the agency world. So I wanted to preface that because I know sometimes people think that there's a one size fits all. There's not. It's just you got to get past that proof of concept.
No, that's great, Jesse, and I think that's important for our audience to hear. So, all right, keep going. Let's hear the rest of this framework.
Cool. So, if you think about step number 3, you've figured out what you're offering to the market based around value, and now you got to bring it to the market. And step number 4 is where you fill the pipeline. Now, the majority of people will focus on a lot of times they're heavily relying on referrals or their network, right?
Yep.
And referrals kind of have this ebb and flow. If you look at the graph of some months they come in, some months they don't, but they're not really like something to rely upon unless you do what's called an active referral system. But that's one of 3 client attraction systems. You have a referral system, an outbound system, and an inbound system. And you build them with a referral system being first, where you do those why did you purchase interviews, and you make it to where it's not so passive, it's actually more active. And then from there, naturally from those referrals and those client interviews, you're going to start figuring out that they're starting to use certain words to describe things, right? I did this with my client Susan and Warren and a bunch of other clients where they started saying spinning the wheels. They just kept on saying it over and over again. I was like, And I put it in an outbound campaign. Are you feeling like you're spinning your wheels? And then I get more Susans, right? So
yes.
The setup of a client attraction system is to use all 3 of those to create what's called an exponential demand. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And what I think so important what you said, paying attention to those words, because I feel like you've had experience in copywriting and other things. Sometimes it's just getting those right words dialed in to, like, it hits the ear. You're like, oh yeah, that makes it. So it's speaking to me. But you could use something else that doesn't, and it just goes right. Like they don't hear it all, and it's like, I just got to get the right message in there.
The crazy thing is none of this stuff is going to be able to be captured correctly by AI. So a lot of people right now are rushing towards this AI revolution. AI
Yeah.
is going to solve fucking everything, and it's not. So AI has never, ever, ever, and I use it a lot, but has never said something that my clients have actually said. Spinning your wheels, reinventing the wheel. They don't say that, right? Unless I actually give them give it a testimonial. So that those right words actually just show that you're an insider, that you get an inside glimpse into their whole world. And when you do those interviews, and you do it in what's called an informational interview, where you ask a very structured question and then you just let them talk, as opposed to it being like something that you're just like trying to like push forward or whatever. That informational interview allows you to gather that information, and it's all the stuff that's like, it's so worth everything.
It's like gold. You're just mining for gold there. That's awesome, Jesse. And that is a very special system and specific way. And so some people I feel like resistant to that because like I want to be organic or whatever. But I find that it actually gives you some more freedom in doing this. I was resistant, even Jesse, like having like a sales script of like I don't want to be having like, but it's not a bad thing. It's actually giving you some structure, I feel, and helping you focus and making it more meaningful. I mean, listen to Jesse, what he's saying. This is time tested gold that you're hearing on the podcast.
And even the sales script piece, if you get to a place where the systems are too rigid, so you build systems, and I have one more step I'll get into in just a second. But with filling your pipeline and really like just looking at systems in general, take a sales script for an example. If things become too rigid, where you feel robotic asking the questions, right? Then go a step higher and allow there to be a framework. So you're moving people through a series of things, and maybe questions are optional, but these are different questions that allow you to get them into that frame, right? So systems don't have to be as rigid as what people think. And a lot of the kind of like counterintuitive teachings that I teach agencies is that a lot of times agencies think that they have to be fully customizable, personalized and reinventing the wheel all the time, or completely productized. And what I tell them is 75% of what you do for every client is always the same. You might think it's different. It's exactly the same. The other 25% is custom to the client. If you can build systems around the 75, so you can focus on the 25, everything works.
Yeah. No, powerful. All right. Hit us with your last pillar here.
All right. This is a recap because I know I go on random tangents. Step number 1, carve out 8 to 10 hours to work on the business. Use that time. And step number 2, to build the systems. When you're building the systems, naturally you figure out what your offer is. Make sure that you're pricing according to value and your ideal client. And you got to bring it to the market by filling up your pipeline. And that leads towards step number 5, which is David's favorite: empower your people. Yes. This is where you build the people systems in order for you to hire the right people, train them effectively, and manage a growing team, so you can focus on growth or taking time away for yourself. And naturally, what happens when you step into that role, if you've built it correctly, is that the people that you hire get placed into a container for them to win. The systems give them an environment to win. The training gives them an environment to win. And then when you're managing it, those systems become just measurable. You can measure it, which allows you to lead and focus more on vision, right? So I know that was speaking to the core of David, leadership, and
no, I mean, it's so important, Jesse, because that's why I love having you on here, because I know the value of systems and the frameworks, and having somebody like you, Jesse, on the podcast. Why we have the Business Roundtable Podcast is that we have our listeners get to hear and interact. They may have never heard of you, Jesse, or Niche and Control. And they're like, oh my goodness, this Jesse gets it. He can help me, and we can go much faster than you can on your own, spinning your wheels, in your words, of trying to do this and saying, look, no, let me have somebody like Jesse come alongside you, help you get that up and running. And and same thing with me. It's like getting your people in alignment, because I see a lot of business owners struggle with this, Jesse. They really want their team to step up, but they're like, what do I step up into? It's not clear to me how to win. And so you've just broken into these 5 pillars here, how to do it at a high level. And there's obviously more details here, but coming alongside and finding out what's working, what's not working, how to adjust. That's the power of hiring somebody like Jesse here with Niche and Control. So these are these are great to hear, Jesse. And I think helping businesses now you get to this foundation and then move and actually then scale, right? So you've got to get this before you're building your foundation that you can actually scale up tier off of, but you can't do that if you have, if you have a poor foundation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And one thing I would love to give to your audience is just a quick
Yeah.
litmus test. So regardless of
Mhm.
whether or not you're an agency owner or not, doesn't matter. I want to give you a lot of value. So if you think about the journey of every single founder, so if you are a founder and an entrepreneur and you don't want to own
Mhm.
a job, you're going to
Yep.
go through 5 main stages, not
Mhm.
5 main transformations within the leverage for growth, but 5 main stages of your own journey, going from the
Mhm.
doer or the subject matter expert all the way to a
Yep.
visionary. So you go from
Mhm.
a doer to a trainer. Okay. In order for you to do that, you have to do 2 things. You have to build operational systems, like I was saying before, and also training systems. Training systems is basically taking the operational systems and making them position specific. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah. Yep. Following you.
All right, so you go from doer to trainer. Once you go from trainer to the next step, which is management or manager,
Mhm.
right? And in order for you to do that, you build enough training and operational systems. Now you got to get into management systems. Okay.
Mhm.
And as you're building management systems, like how do you manage the work that's being done? And how do you do that without asking people questions all the time? Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? Right. And then from there, you go from manager to leader. And in order for you to do that, you have to build leadership systems. It's all that
Mhm.
kind of like where's the business going, right? And
Yep.
how can we make sure that those managers understand the direction that we're taking them, right?
Yep.
And then from there,
Yep.
you go from leadership into visionary, which is all based around understanding like where am I going to go in the next 5-10 years. So if you think about
Mm.
it, you go from doer to trainer to manager to leader to visionary. And in order for you to
Mhm.
do that, you realize wherever you are. Do you feel like you're the doer right now? Okay, what do you need to
Yep.
do? Training systems, operational systems. If you feel like the manager, okay, you got to figure out management systems, right? And then have somebody else play in that role, right? So
Mhm.
that should be a good litmus test to
That's
figure
a
out what needs
great
work.
litmus test. I literally I was just talking to a client right before we recorded this podcast, Jesse, about that, where they're in the doer kind of management phase, and then this person's a fairly high level person, and I'm like, you're totally being underutilized here. You should
Yeah.
definitely be a manager and moving into the leadership phase, but the company hasn't seen that or hasn't been intentional about it, Jesse. And so what
Yeah.
happens is they keep people in certain roles, and the company is basically you can't scale, then you're just flat is
Yeah.
what I've seen. And it's like, okay.
Mhm.
And for me personally, that move between manager and leader, I didn't realize at first I thought they're one and the same. And I realized, no, no, these are two different things. And
Mhm.
I realized there's no way I can if I don't number one manage well and then I have to learn how to lead, I can't get people to follow me. And then, like you said, go to that visionary place. And
Mhm.
so but what I think is interesting is it's challenging as a business owners because we're moving from the known to the unknown, and that is it
Mhm.
sometimes intimidating. It's like I've never done this before, and it's like, yeah, well, all of us, this is all new, but
Mhm.
the successful ones are willing to step in there, but not blindly alone. They're looking for help along the way, but you
Mhm.
have to be willing to step beyond the known and maybe the bottleneck if you find yourself
Mhm.
uh, right? And I've seen you live this out, Jesse. I've seen you
Yeah.
step repeatedly. Okay, we're gonna try this thing new. This is thing new because you're
Mhm.
like, this is how we grow.
Yeah. It must be my high quick start.
I mean, I guess fail fast. I mean, like you said, I mean, hey, that didn't work. All right, well, learn from that,
Keep
tweak,
going.
adjust. I mean, I've seen, quite honestly, for those that I've seen Jesse. You literally have shared some amazing insights because we've known each other for a long time, and just I've seen him live this out. So those who are listening are wondering. I mean, Jesse has lived this out. He has, had highs and lows, but he sees the vision of where he's going,
Mhm.
and I love that commitment and integrity, Jesse, and what you bring to you personally, but also niche and control and the way you
Mhm.
serve your clients.
Thank you, man.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was thinking back because I knew I was going to be on this, and I
Mhm.
know we worked together and mastermind together
Yep.
really heavily in 2022 and then
Mhm.
2023. And
Yep.
during that time, it was interesting because I was transitioning out of the one-on-one coaching, which is like Jesse in a job,
Yep,
right?
yep,
And
yep.
then, and then towards more of a group coaching kind of mastermind model. And it was interesting because I had a vision and a dream of impacting 1 million entrepreneurs, and I couldn't shake it. And I don't know what people believe that are watching this, but I believe that God called me to do something much bigger than what I was doing.
Yep.
And am I serving just the 15 coaching clients one-on-one,
Mhm.
or am I doing this much bigger kind of thing? And that's how I got called into a vision that led towards writing a book, doing 275 podcasts,
Yeah,
and
look at you,
you know,
man. You're a pro.
getting it all out there, and then switching my whole model to be able to serve people in a really, really deep way. And I think that people that are kind of in that middle part where they're trying to go from management to leadership, you need space. So you can't get to leadership and understanding a direction of things when you're just busy all the time. And you can't actually even get into visionary if you're just busy all the time, right? And so sometimes what you need to do is you just need to step back from everything else that's going on and then just go, where do I want to be in 5, 10, 20 years? And if that's really hard, where do you want to be in a year from now if no other thing was holding me back?
Yep.
And once you start figuring that out, it'll start pulling on you. And then randomly you might have a dream just like me. And then all of a sudden you're like, I can't shake it. I got to impact 1 million people. Like, crap,
Yeah.
this is fundamentally changing everything that I'm doing right now. Like, so.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, you see the possibility. That's what I love about you, Jesse. You see this. And I think I know for me, I had a scarcity or negative mindset for many years, and there was a switch turn, and I had this abundant mindset and this way of thinking of that God is for me. There's so much better. I definitely recognize my dreams, my visions are I played small. Sometimes I played not to lose instead of playing to win. And to your point, though, I think a lot of people live. I can't remember who said this, but this quote: "Live lives of quiet desperation." They're alone. They don't feel connected, and they're not living in their true purpose and their calling because they're kind of just settling. And I think you and I definitely feel strongly that we're called to serve. There's much more for us to do. And I want that for everybody. I know you do as well, Jesse. That's why I have you on the podcast, because again, you lead from what you live. You are a person of integrity, the person that is really um, you know, showing what it means to go after this. And it may mean, ideally you're gonna meet 1 million or more, but it's the race, where we're called to go. And everybody's on their own journey. So you don't have to compare yourself to Jesse or me or anybody else. But it's just important that you go and you hear some tools and resources so that you're not alone and you can learn more and check out Jesse's book here.
Meanwhile, I'm like, they got to do the 3 cells in here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, if you're special, obviously with marketing agency owners, but I think this is applicable whether you're a marketing agency owner or not. I mean, you even have not just your book, Jesse. I know follow along because I know you've done some masterminds and some other great opportunities. So if you're not on his mailing list or following on LinkedIn or social media, we're going to provide all that. For our listeners, Jesse, so that they can connect and follow up with you. But as we're getting closer, we're kind of wrapping up the podcast for today, and we're going to have you back because we're going to have much more conversations and roundtables. What would you just say, as your reminder or just key takeaway that you'd want others to consider here that might be feeling stuck, not wanting to start, what to do, what would you encourage them with today?
Yeah, I would say if you're an entrepreneur listening to this, I have a very special message for you. And then those that are not entrepreneurs, there's another message. Entrepreneurs, if you are feeling as though you're owning a job, there is a very specific process, a proven process that you just follow that allows you to get out of that job that you've created into owning a business. And that's what we've talked about here. I would recommend rewatching this numerous times. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn and you can ask me questions just like, hey, I saw the podcast that you and David were talking about. This really resonated. I can give you more resources. I am more than happy and called to help you. So that's the entrepreneurial side. for those that are not entrepreneurs, but you might be in that management layer and you're trying to get into the leadership layer that me and David are talking about. The best way for you to get out of management is just to realize that management is like one big routine. You're running the management, right? In order for you to get into leadership, you have to start actually understanding how to lead yourself. And that you start by understanding where you are currently and where you want to go. And then what do you need to become? Who do you need to become in order for you to start bridging that gap? And when you start making those changes, it is palatable to the people that are following you. They can notice a difference when you start shifting. And when you start to lead, it might not be within the same company. I know that I know that's an interesting kind of like concept. Oh, I want to grow within a company. Sometimes your leadership, you get pulled into something that's a little bit different than maybe what you're used to. And if the job that you're working in right now, that's not going to allow you to go from management to leader, you become the leader internally and then you get recruited. Right. So all the leaders are called. There's a reason why you're being called to leadership. And if it's too much, if leadership is like something that's conceptual, but you're not willing to do the work, you're not meant to lead. Yeah. So that's what I'll end.
Yeah. Thank you, Jesse. Great words. Thank you guys for listening in, checking it out. Again, we're going to have all of the links for Jesse. We and I are connected on LinkedIn. So if you guys are connected with me, you can find Jesse there. Again, he puts great content out. Thank you for being a resource, writing the book. Jesse, it's a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, David. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody. Of course, like, subscribe, leave your comments. We'll make sure Jesse and I will respond to them. Again, thanks for being a part of the Business Roundtable podcast. Until next time, be well, everybody.